Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sip Clip segment. I'm your host, Foti Stamos, and with me, my co-host, Ari Kalos.
Hello, everyone. What's going on?
And it's that time of the week again where we explore different segments of wine in the mysterious world that most folks have never come across. And in today's segment, we're exploring a Greek wine called Retsina.
Ooh, Retsina. Very well known, very familiar to, I'm sure, everybody, especially Greeks, obviously, and has a bit of a reputation, I would say.
Yeah, unfortunately, the reputation is not what we've wanted to be for many, many years. And in the past, whenever you ask someone, have they had Greek wine before? For those that have had said yes, it's either been Mavrodaphne, which is a sweet dessert wine, or Retsina. And most folks, for the most part, did not have good experiences with Retsina.
So I want to ask you, well, I can't really ask you because you're kind of like a professional, but like, I'll ask myself, like, what do you think of when you think of Retsina? I mean,
Well,
can you answer that or?
Well, for me, it's two-sided. So I grew up as a kid in a Greek American household. My parents had Retsina in the house all the time, so I was used to it. That was our wine, Greek wine in the house. But as I got older, and I started to hear Retsina in the public, it was always like negative, like Retsina, how can you drink that? It's so piney and it's so like offensive and it's this and that, and I just started to realize that it didn't appeal to most folks other than Greeks, for that matter.
So yeah, I have the same kind of experience, but like, if you just say the word Retsina to me, I just think, oh, cheap Greek wine.
That's what we think, right? So, and there's some truth to that. It's inexpensive wine from Greece that's been around for a very long time, if not hundreds, I'm going to say thousands of years that, the production of Retsina has been around. It's been part of our food and wine culture. We're going to break it down in this segment so that we can kind of understand and hopefully appreciate Retsina. But prior to that, Retsina kind of put this really bad stigma in the reputation of Greece's wine world. And it was hard to get past that because, I'll tell you from my personal experiences when I was in the trade, when I hit the road doing a lot of events and exhibitions with Greek wines, I can't tell you how many people would come up to the Greek wine booth and they're like, oh, I don't drink Retsina, without even trying anything. Or, oh, just make sure you don't pour me into that Retsina. I'm like, wow, like this is like so disheartening to hear it over and over and over. But that was just basically in the US how Greek wines were unfortunately being marketed to, because twofolds. One is that was back then, back in the 60s and 70s, the majority of wine importation from Greece was inexpensive white rosé red wine and Retsina, right? And it was being marketed into the heavily Greek populated neighborhoods and towns of the US. And then for those that travel to Greece on vacation as tourists, that's what was being featured to them, whether it was a taverna, a cafe, or a restaurant. They were being offered Retsina, and that was people's perception that Greece makes this awful piney wine. So fast forward, things have changed, right? And we've gone sort of beyond that hump of this stigma of Greek wines being either sweet or offensively piney. But Retsina has a long history, and there's a reason why Retsina exists, right?
Yeah.
And it goes way back to the times where Greeks were, considered very reputable explorers, and they were in the shipping industry. But thousands of years ago, when Greek merchants set out to venture off into different parts of the world, they would load their ships up with food, water, and wine. So back then, we're talking about maybe 3,000 years ago. The only method to store wine was in clay vats. It was the only type of material they had to store wine. They didn't have barrels and oak back then.
Yeah.
So the only way to actually seal the cap, the top of the clay vat, was with this concoction that they came up with, which was an adhesive that was a combination of tar and pine resin. So when they mix that solution together, it would create a perfect seal, so that no air can get into the vat to turn or spoil the wine. So it's a sealer. So they would load up all these ships with these clay vats and these covers that were sealed with this pine resin and tar solution.
So there's a reason you say piney when you describe Retsina at least in the old days. I don't know about modern days, but that's the reason.
So, well, we're gonna get to that point. But so what happened was when the vessels were out at sea for months at a time, so the wine and the food and the water were stored underneath at the low back. Is that basically during the hot weather, it gets so hot down there that this adhesive would start to melt a little bit, and it would drip into the wine. So you would get essence of that adhesive into the wine, right? But back then, what I was being told is that at that point, when you're like thousands of miles into the ocean and you have limited supplies, they were not going to throw it out. They just sucked it up and they drank it, even though it tasted like pine. So that became customary over years. Like they got used to it because they had no other way to do it. So long story short, they got so used to it that they started to continue doing the process of making wine with a little bit of resin in it because they got used to the flavor and they acquired it.
That's interesting. I
But
did not know that.
you're going to hear stories and myths where, I've heard anything from, the Ottoman Empire wanted to destroy Greece's wine culture by deliberately putting pine in their production. You might hear that during World War II, the Germans did it purposely to to destroy Greece's wine culture. You're going to hear so many things about, the myths and stories, but, records do show that, and research shows that this was the process that Greek merchants took back then. And it was the result of this solution dripping into the wine during extreme heat down in the ships.
In all my experience with so many, different historical facts and scientific facts, I tend to believe the most like simple explanation, and that to me is the most
Makes
realistic,
sense?
simple explanation.
There you go.
That's where I'm going.
So that became customary, and going back now to a little more modern times. When I mean modern times, in the last maybe 75 years, the production of Retsina is very basic and simple. It's as easy as producing white wine, collecting their white grapes, pressing them, fermenting them, and right when fermentation starts, they actually include a cube of sap from the Aleppo pine tree. And then they put that into the vat. So when it ferments, they let this sack of sap release all of the essence of the flavor of the pine. And then once it's like all done, they remove the resin and they let the wine continue to ferment. And then that's how they get white wine with a little bit of resin in it, which is known as the Retsina.
That's really interesting. Like I honestly, I grew up with Retsina. I've known Retsina every single step of my life. I did not know that actually had a pine element to it.
It does, from a very distinct tree, the Aleppo pine tree. But here's the thing: over the years, the winemakers have been able to kind of, what we would say, master the production, because before it was very rough and raw the way that they made it. So there was like either way too much resin in it, and that's how some people liked it, or there wasn't just enough, so you couldn't even tell. Now there's more balance.
You were telling me before that like sometimes the Greek tourists would go to Greece and have a really bad experience. Is it because they would like, why exactly?
Because depending on where they were in Greece, certain parts of Greece producers would put in an abundance of resin into the production of their wine, and that's how they liked it. But for the person who's not used to it, that's a shocker. Like having that amount of pine resin in your white wine is like, not the best thing or not the most inviting thing. So depending on where they went, they would consider it awful experiences.
I see. Yeah, and I guess if you're not used to it and you just kind of show up somewhere and you're tasting this new type of wine, it could be a little off-putting.
Right, and again, like I, I take into consideration what people say. Like, well, it's not the best thing to experience if you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
Oh, let me have a glass of white wine. They pour the white wine, and all of a sudden you take a sip, and it tastes like pine salt to you, and you spit it out.
You know what's funny though? Like I've drank Retsina like a million times. I never kind of associated it with pine, but now that you mention it, maybe like I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean,
I really feel like I need to have Retsina like now to like kind of with this knowledge to really like put two and two together.
together. So believe it or not, there's like a group of winemakers who are trying to like really elevate the production and reputation of Retsina. It is protected where Retsina can only be made in Greece, right? But it can only be called Retsina in Greece. And if for those that decide that they want to try it outside of Greece, they can't call it Retsina. They got to call it resonated white wine.
Really?
Right, right. Isn't that cool?
That doesn't sound very appetizing.
But there is a slowly growing following for Retsina, believe it or not, because if you think about it, pine, releases some very floral and herbal flavors and aromas. And if you can tweak it to the right levels, you can get a really aromatic, floral, and slightly herbaceous white wine, which is actually delicious.
Listen, I like Retsina. I'm not one of those people that will badmouth Retsina. I just have a reputation in my head from growing up, and obviously, like our parents, my parents, your parents, I'm sure lots of people out there, their parents are like, immigrants. And when they got here, they didn't have a lot of money, and Retsina was always on the table. So I just always associate with like, just this like kind of inexpensive, I don't want to say cheap, but like inexpensive wine, Greek wine that they wanted because we're Greeks, we're immigrants.
Right. And we want to
I
support,
like it.
and I enjoy it. Like, I got to tell you, especially now, summertime, and it's hot out. You get a nice cold glass of Retsina, it goes down really good.
Yeah.
Really good. So on that note, we're starting to see a nice introduction of well-made Retsina coming to the U.S. market. The one that we have to feature today that we're sipping on is from a northern winery in just outside of Thessaloniki, northern Greece, called Kekris Winery. And
this bottle is awesome. Show this bottle.
So it looks like it's called teardrop. So obviously the bottle looks like a teardrop.
I love
but
it.
It's basically what when the sap from the tree is coming out, they look like teardrops.
Yeah.
So they're
That's
collecting
awesome.
these saps. They're collecting these teardrops of resin. It's a 500 milliliter bottle, so it's 3/4 of a bottle. And in my opinion, this Retsina is so elegant and delicate that let me just pour some in the glass because this is my second bottle, but don't tell anybody. Immediately once you pour it right into your glass, right away aromas are like just coming at you.
Let's see that glass in front of you. Yeah, that's Retsina, baby.
So it's very floral, lots of like distinct aromas, but you can smell, I don't know if this makes sense, it smells fresh. It's like when you first cut grass.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying.
Or after it rains and like a lot of green is starting to flourish.
Yeah.
This is essence that's what it's reminding me of. So then we're gonna kind of dig in and get into the actual wine. Light, crisp, and again, I mentioned herbaceous. I can taste that slither of pininess, but it's not like I'm chewing on a pine cone. It's just slightly there, but it reminds me of just like herbs, freshly chopped herbs that are, green, not dried herbs, but fresh herbs that,
Yeah.
basil and like all these different cool herbs that, but it really works. It works with like the light crispness and minerality of the wine, along with a little bit of that herbiness to it. It's just, and it's great for sipping, but it's even better with food. So obviously, Greek cuisine.
I've always had Retsina with food, just all the years that I've been drinking it. Greek festival, Greek events, Greek parties at home, always with food.
Right. So, and again, they're still inexpensive. They haven't gone to the point where they're going to become outrageous because of its popularity and demand. This one is called Kekribari. And again, it's becoming more available in the US market. I highly recommend it. We're definitely going to have it on our platforms shortly for sale. I'm sure that you can ask for it at any of your local retailers. And a little side note to this, and not because this is why we chose it, but this is just coincidence, that the producer of Kekribari, Mr. Kekris, has a brother, Evangelos, that actually lives in Boston.
That's so funny.
Right?
So we got roots here.
We got roots here. This is just coincidence. But
I want
definitely.
I want to also mention. You said like the taste, the floral, the herbs, the everything about this Retsina works. Well, you also said that we're talking hundreds of years, if not thousands, of production. Like
thousands, yes.
That to me says it works. It definitely works. I mean, how is something going to be in existence for so long if it didn't work?
Well, here's the thing. It's a funny thing that you mentioned that, because we have these debates and conversations that, Greeks would explore, and they would, be great merchants and do business, and they kept this to themselves, and they would share. They would share their customs, their traditions, their wine, their food, but no one really left a mark anywhere with these voyages so that others can actually replicate what they're doing. So it's like, so they would come back and they would continue making it at Retsina, and it would stay it would stay in Greece. It was never really marketed outside of Greece over the centuries. Nor have I come across any information or material that shows, Greeks producing Retsina outside of Greece for business purposes.
Interesting.
Because as business people doing trade, you would think that would be the case, but it wasn't.
That's actually like really interesting, actually.
The only thing I can say that is, even prior to not even prior, but during this whole thing, Greeks, though, that found settlements in southern Italy, decided that they're going to do business in Italy. They brought clippings of vines from Greece and planted them in Italy. So the southern part of Italy, from Rome and down all the way to Sicily, there's a huge presence of grape varieties that were from clippings of vines that came from Greece thousands of years ago. But they lost their identity through the years, so they became Italian varieties. There's a handful or half a dozen of grape varieties in southern Italy that still contain a Greek name. But, which is interesting, because they brought grapes, but they never brought the method of making Retsina to other countries.
So can I stake a claim that all Italian wine is Greek in essence?
Yes, that's the same case for that, and the same case for pizza. But that's a story for another segment.
All right, I'm going to give all the Italians that write into us your address so they could come and talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
But I'm a firm believer. I don't want to piss anybody off, but I totally believe that it's all rooted in Greece. Everything is rooted in Greece.
Yeah, we're very generous people. I've noticed as a culture, we love to laugh and share and do things together to have a good time. And probably in that translation, we just gave everything away to others to prosper.
That sounds about right.
Right. Yeah. Here, have this. Take this. Take that.
And then once they prospered, all we did was badmouth them.
Right. That's going to be a segment on our next show on Connecting Greeks with Angelo.
Yeah, that sounds like a Connecting Greeks episode right there.
Right, excellent. But yeah, so I totally want all of our viewers who are watching this segment, I encourage you to try Retsina again. If you had it before and you didn't care for it, I want you to revisit it. There's definitely some really good selections that are in the market now, and they're definitely going to change your mind, especially when you're having them with some type of food, for sure.
I'm totally sold. I mean, I'm very familiar with Retsina, but just the way you described it and the new information you brought to my attention, like, just makes me say, you know, I can't wait to just have Retsina again.
Definitely.
And if you haven't ever had it, like,
now's the time.
Understand what it is, know what to expect, and you will appreciate it. I believe so.
100%.
All right.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Foti. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Always great information. Always interesting. Always fun. Well, I think I hear my son calling. So we're gonna wrap it up. And
so
thanks,
just
man.
real quickly, we'll hopefully for those that are watching this now, join us this Thursday at 7 p.m. for our Stray Gin Wild Dog Gin cocktail webinar with our friend Johnny Lavanos, who just put out the first, or Greece's first wild gin. And what does that mean? We'll tell you on the segment when you watch it.
Awesome. Tune in for our next sip clip. Tune in for our next webinars. Tune in to Connecting Greeks. Tune in to just everything we do.
All right.
We do a lot of
everybody.
stuff. All right, Foti. We'll talk. Bye-bye. Cheers.